All right, so steering and alignment. You should have learned about 3 angles. What are they? What are the 3 steering angles for alignment?
I totally forget all 3 of the names.
2 of them start with a C and the other one starts with a T.
There's a toe line, right?
Toe is one of them. Good.
Camber?
Camber is one. Caster. Okay, so let's talk about what these are. What is toe? What are we talking about angle-wise for toe?
The tires either jaded inward or outward and it causes it to drag, right?
Like this, right? So if I'm looking at the front of my car, are the tires like this, or is one of them, something? They should be pretty straight. And you said what would happen if one was like this?
You're dragging it and causes that.
Yeah, because it's still rotating like this, but you're going that way. So it's like dragging and skipping along. It's one of the worst things for your tire wear. This thing will eat through your tires very, very fast. So let's draw this. There's the front and the rear of my car. So we're talking, okay? And it can be any way. So let's say you're driving down the road one day, and everything's fine, and then all of a sudden you hit a pothole, which are very common in Rexburg. You're driving 35 miles an hour, you didn't see it, like, boom, right there. So you're straight, and then as soon as you hit that pothole, all of a sudden you leave that pothole and something got jarred, and now my tire's like this. This is obviously over-exaggerated. We're talking just a couple degrees. Now, if my tire did that, what happened to my steering wheel once I got through the pothole? It moved, right? So what did I do? I straightened it back. So here's what actually happened. Driving, pothole, straighten my steering wheel. So now what's the problem? Am I wearing 1 tire or 2? And that's the problem with toe. Toe will eat through both tires because when one is off, and it will make your steering wheel crooked, and then you're going to straighten it, and now they're both off. So this one you want to get fixed very, very quickly. So the number 1 sign of problem with a toe angle is a crooked steering wheel. So if your steering wheel's crooked like this, but you're going straight, you probably have a toe angle issue that needs to be resolved.
Is it possible, so my Jeep has that, but it's had that for like at least a decade.
Well, whoever did the alignment, whenever you did the alignment, they might have done it wrong.
Okay.
So when they do the alignment, they have to lock your steering wheel in place, straight forward, then make the adjustments so that when they're done, the wheels are straight and the steering wheel is straight. If they make the adjustments without locking the steering wheel will move, and you'll be going straight, even though your steering wheel looks like this, which drives a lot of people nuts. It drives me nuts.
Oh, don't drive my car.
It drives me insane. Right, the Ford emblem's this way, and I'm going straight. I don't like that. Should be. So, anyways, get that fixed. What it does is it eats your tire in a way that's called feathering. And so at first you won't really be able to see it, but you'll be able to feel it. If you run your hand across the tire, okay, if I run my hand across the tire in one direction and it feels smooth, but when I go the other direction it feels jagged, that is feathering. Because what's happening is it's causing like a Sonic the Hedgehog wear pattern on here. So if I run my hand this way, smooth, when I come back it's jagged. That's a feathering effect. So you can catch it early if you check your tires often enough, or if you see the crooked steering wheel. But if you let it go, the feathering will get so bad the tire, it's not even. I've seen some ones where you look at it, the tire just looks like it's all over the place. It's just weird. Okay? So get that one fixed. Camber. What is camber? Yeah.
It's tilted inward, right? Or outward?
Good. So if I'm looking at the front of my car, my tires are like this. So now the front is here, right? I'm looking straight on at it. If the tire is tilted inward or outward, that's camber. Good. So what's that going to cause? Like, what's that going to do if this tire is tilted out?
Well, you're not going to have your treads hitting at the right spot.
So it's going to wear out
The outside.
the outside edge. Right? very quickly. Or if it was tilted in, same thing, inside edge is going to get worn. So underinflated, it was both edges were getting worn, but with a camber issue, only one edge is getting worn. I'm sure some of you guys have seen this before. And it's going to do one more thing. If I'm driving down the road and my tire is tilted out, what's it going to cause?
Drag.
Well, it's going to cause a pull. If I let go of the steering wheel, it's going to pull me over to the side of the road over here. Okay? If I have this one, it's going to pull me this way. If I have this one like this, it's that way. So whichever one is tilting, it's going to push you over to the side of the road. So if you have a problem where you let go of your steering wheel and you can't, it won't maintain a straight line, it just pulls you off, you're probably dealing with a camber issue. Or an underinflated tire, right? What if this tire was really underinflated compared to the other three? That could also kind of pull you off the side of the road. Now keep in mind, the road itself is like this. Why do they do this to the roads when they make them? Water, right? We want water to run off the road. So it is normal as you're driving down the road to slightly drift off, but it's not normal to pull, right? When my alignment is good, I can usually go like a mile, and just after that mile of not holding my steering wheel, maybe it started to drift off the edge by that time. So that's really good. If they do a really good alignment, what they'll do is they'll set your angles just enough to pull against this pole, which is a good idea, but then if I go to the other side of the road, it's going to pull me off that side. Does that make sense? And we're talking like 1 degree difference. That's all they're doing. Just enough to slightly over.
So that would be good for someone like a semi, like, or someone who's just driving on the road straight long stretches for a long period of time. It would be good to do that. But if you're like a mailman who's having to cross the road several times to get on different sides,
Absolutely.
Probably wouldn't do that for them.
And I drive on this side of the road all the time. Like when I'm on the freeway, once I make a pass, I'm not one of those people that goes over and then back. Over, back. Like if I get in this lane and there's nobody ahead of me or whatever, I'll stay in this lane for a minute before I get back over. And then I'll pass the next guy, you know what I mean? Cops say you're not supposed to do that or whatever, but I mean, if somebody gets behind me, I'll get over. It's just, I don't like to go back and forth like a million times while I'm driving on the freeway. So I stay on the side of the road quite a bit, so I don't really like to set it that way. But some people do. And you also set it for, and I hate to say this, I'm not trying to be rude to anybody, but if the guy that drives the car is like 300-pound dude, it's going to sag the suspension on that side of the car. That too will cause a pull. So if you want to help the guy stay straight on the road and you know that, you'll set the alignment if you were really good. I mean, you'd have to be really observant to do this. And a lot of technicians don't necessarily see the customers. But you would set the alignment so that it slightly pulls this way to compensate for the pull that happens. Same thing if you had like a lot of weight in the back, it raises the whole front end up. And so you compensate things for that. You do things like that for your customers. I think that's.
So I have a question, and I don't know if you know the answer to it, but airless tires, how can you adjust?
What type of airless tires are you talking about?
I don't know. Where it looks like there's like a ridge, not a ridge system, like
where there's no rim. I mean, the rim is like rubber. Is that the one you're talking about?
where there's no air within, but it's kind of like.
Looks like rubber spokes.
Yeah. Throughout the tire. Will you see the same kind of wear and tear that you would on a normal tire?
That I don't know. They haven't been used enough, I don't think, for me at least, to know any of those. Do you guys know what he's talking about? Michelin came out it's like 30 years ago they came out with this tire, and now it's finally maybe kind of picking up steam, finally, after 30 years. And that's usually how technology goes anyways. But it's a tire that, instead of having air in it, it's got your tread that goes all the way around. So imagine like a thick tread. And then to the centerpiece, they do these
Yeah, like that.
spokes of rubber
And it's like hard
really
to-
good, strong rubber.
Yeah.
And they can flex and bend. So this thing is strong enough to support the vehicle, but as you go over like a rock, it just kind of, just kind of gives and goes with it. They're good tires.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of interested because one of the coolest things to me is that they would never pop. So like you can stick a million nails into it and
And then you have
nothing's,
snow tires.
yeah, nothing's gonna happen. Yeah, have a snow tire. So, and off-roading wise, it's really nice because then you don't have to worry about the inflation of your tire or many other things as far as tires go.
The only thing you have to worry about though is stuff getting in it.
Yeah.
Like twigs, things like that, if you're off-roading,
Mhm.
rocks. Wintertime would really suck because now you have snow like caked in there. It's going to cause some really
And I guess the
crazy out of
icing,
balance.
if water gets in it and it freezes, I wonder if it could expand the gaps between each of the spokes.
Maybe. Again, I don't know if there's enough research yet to figure all that out. Maybe there is. I haven't read it. Mud, I can't imagine would be that great. It would almost like suck you, like if you went off-roading and you were in mud, it would almost like suck you more in than help you get out. Because it's like in there. So, I don't know. Question. Alright, let's go to this last one. Caster. So caster is, if I was looking at the side view of my car, something mounted the tire of my vehicle. Alright, so and we're going to talk about struts. Let's do struts. So as far as your suspension system goes, you guys talked about struts. Struts is like a shock absorber and a coil spring all put together in one. So if you had a strut, which is really common on cars, it comes down and looks like this. The angle that it is mounting to the tire is your caster angle. So this right here in relation to the straight up and down, that's caster. So the way I think about this is like a motorcycle has a lot of positive caster. Like you're steering back here, but your wheel's clear over there. Does that make sense? So motorcycles, you don't turn the wheel, you just roll with the curves, and that's what would have to happen if you were set up like this. If you made it where it was like this, and the wheel was actually behind the mounting point, it would be a lot like a Segway. You know, like when you're on a Segway, you have to lean forward, and then once you lean forward, like you can just sit there and spin in circles if you wanted to. It steers really, really easy, is what I'm saying. So on a car that has, for the most part, square tires meeting the road, if you go too positive on the caster, you're going to have a really hard time turning because you can't roll.
Like a motorcycle.
You can't roll like a motorcycle, right? You got two tires and they're square, it's not going to roll. So too much positive caster is going to help you go straight, but it's going to really, really struggle turning. Too much negative caster like this, you're going to have a hard time keeping the steering wheel straight. You let go of that thing, you're just going to be like wandering all over the road because it has a hard time. It's turning too easy. So what they do is they actually set your car with a slightly positive caster so that you can stay straight when you're driving, but still be able to turn. Okay? And this is a non-adjustable angle. So when you go get an alignment, they don't do anything with caster. They check it, but they don't really change it much because it's built into the design. So unless you're swapping out parts, you're not messing with it at all. So usually you only have problems with caster if you get in a wreck and something gets bent or broken. And then they'll see that and they fix it. Okay? So really, when you go in for an alignment, it's these two that they're adjusting. And then this one might get affected a little bit because of the adjustment on the camber. But for the most part, the caster doesn't change a whole lot. These are what you focus on. So how many of you have had an alignment before?
On my car?
Did you watch them do it? It wasn't a place you could see it? Did they give you a printout? Really? So what they should do is they're going to pull it up on they pull it up on his computer screen. It's all done by like lasers and stuff like that. And so when they pull it up on the computer, it just looks like a bunch of red and green numbers. It's saying red means this number's out of specification, green is good. And so what they should do is they take like a screenshot of what it was first, then they do all the adjustments, and then after the adjustments, everything should be in the green, and then they give you it back and they say, hey, look, I did something. So I can prove to you that they didn't just take your money for no reason, you know. So I like to see printouts when I get alignment's done. How much did you pay? Do you remember?
No.
So I'd say average price for an alignment in this area is somewhere between $50 and $80. It's not terrible. You should, but that's just the alignment. So if you have to get something replaced, that's going to add into it, because the steering system affects the toe a lot, and your suspension and steering affect your camber a lot. And so if something is broken or worn out on those components, that's going to cause those, and they can't adjust it. So they have to replace it, then adjust it. So how often should you get an alignment, do you think?
I feel like, I don't know, this is a shot in the dark, but only once you start noticing issues, like, if you're not having such a bad problem, why go in every 5,000 or 20 or 30,000 miles if there's no problem with the tires, if the tires look good, or the fuel economy is the same depending on, air pressure, then I personally wouldn't go in unless I notice an actual issue. Oh wait, I'm pulling off more this way, or oh, the tire right here is burning out faster than on the other side.
I agree. Yeah, if you don't notice a tire wear issue, if you don't notice anything, steering wheel straight, you're not pulling, there's not really any reason to go get an alignment. But if you do get new tires, or you do anything in relation to tires, steering, any of that stuff, get an alignment done afterwards. Make sure they do the alignment. I always like to get an alignment right after I get new tires to make sure my new tires last. Because I don't want to eat through the inside edge of a brand new tire because I didn't get it checked. Because by the time you notice that inside edge wearing, you've already worn it. And that sucks. So that's kind of the general rule, like you said. If you don't notice anything, don't do it. But if I put new tires on, I'm going to do it. Okay. Let's see. That pretty much covers most of the alignment stuff. Unless you guys have any questions. Okay, then let's look at a couple animations.
One question for all-wheel drive. I may have already asked you this, but when you have all-wheel drive and you replace one tire, you have to get them all replaced, correct? Or
So that's a great question. So the rule with tires on most vehicles is whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other side. Okay, so if I replace my driver's front tire, I need to replace the passenger front tire with it, because that's going to change my alignments. If I have one tire that's bigger than the other one because it's brand new, stuff like that. So for the most part, that's your number one. But yes, when you're dealing with all-wheel drive vehicles, you have to start thinking front to back. Now this goes back to drivetrains. We didn't cover a lot on differentials, but you should have seen it in the PowerPoint. Differentials allow your wheels to turn at two different speeds, right? Mostly for going around corners. Because if I can't turn if my inside wheel can't slow down in relationship to my outside wheel when I go around a corner, then that must mean that this wheel has to do a burnout in order to turn a corner, right? So you have these differentials. And anyway, that allows them to turn at two different speeds. But what a lot of people don't think about is if I go over a bump, that also means the wheels have to turn at a different speed. Because what if this tire went over a bump but this tire didn't? That means this one traveled a further distance to get through than this one did. So bumps have a major effect, which should also tell you that if the tires are different sizes, it's going to have an effect on your differential. So if I have a tire that's a very different size than this one, that's making my differential work all the time, which is going to wear out my differential faster than it should be. Which is why when they say if you get a flat tire and you're driving with a spare, the donut spare, you're only supposed to go like 40 to 50 miles an hour, and that's why. You have one tire that's ridiculously small compared to the others. It's not made to go very fast, and it's also wearing out your differential very, very quickly. So you don't want to drive it for a very long time, nor do you want to go very fast with it. Okay? Now, all-wheel drive vehicles have a differential between the front and the back as well, to allow the front and back to turn at different speeds. For the same purpose, when I go through a corner, they travel a different distance around the curve. So, if you put smaller tires in the front versus in the back, they're going to be spinning at different speeds. So yes, you would be overworking that differential that's in the middle of the car. So, very good. So usually, if you have all-wheel drive, do all 4 tires at the same time. If you have front or rear-wheel drive vehicles, you can get away with just doing 2 at a time. But if you're buying cheaper tires, like finding better deals, you wouldn't have to worry too much about it. It's just, it's pretty intense when you're driving like a truck and the tires are like $300 or $400 a piece. Very expensive. Okay, let me turn this animation on real quick. Look at those 3 alignment angles real quick. So this first one, we're looking at camber. Alright, so the tilt outer in. So if I have positive camber, it would look like this on one side. That's a big deal, right? And notice the outside wear. Okay, if I had camber problems on both sides, it would look like this.
Would it slow your speed?
Not necessarily, but it would. If it was equal on both sides, it's not going to cause a pull, so it would be hard to tell. I've never seen that before, but. What if something went wrong with your springs? Right, so these springs that are supporting the vehicle's weight, what if one of them was broken? Like that. Notice what happened to the camber. Not to mention, every time you go over a bump, it's going to be loud. Or if you had a weak spring and it just was sagging more. This is really common if you've overloaded the vehicle lots of times. It's just the springs don't have what they used to. Okay, now let's look at toe. That's what we talked about, hitting the pothole. Notice how the steering wheel is crooked now. Both tires are getting worn. If you look really close, you can see the feathered edge that I was talking about. See that jagged look? Or toe out could also happen. And this time you'll notice that the jagged edge is in the opposite direction. Okay, now let's do caster. So here's positive caster.
So caster.
See, so it's trying to go through a curve. Look how much this one struggles to make it through the curve. Just has a harder time turning. How do I go back? Okay, now negative caster looks like this. This time he's going to have a hard time even going straight in the first place. Constantly correcting to try to stay. Okay, so now let's look at the steering system. This is the most common style of steering system on passenger cars. It's called rack and pinion. So when you're from your steering wheel, it's better to just point. I can't reach that. From your steering wheel down, this is your steering shaft, and it comes down and turns into just a little tiny gear right here, and the gear is called a pinion, and it turns a rack. Okay, so as you turn your wheel, the little gear spins and the rack just moves over one direction or the other direction. Okay, and from the rack there is a joint inside this boot right here called an inner tie rod, and then there's a connection right out here that we'll zoom in on in a second called an outer tie rod. Those are the most common things to go bad on your steering system. The tie rods go through a lot of angle changes. Not only do they handle the pivoting as you're turning the wheel, but they also handle up and down with the wheels. So it's just like your kneecap. It has, like when you end up having knee problems someday, it's because your cartilage gets worn out and now you're rubbing like bone on bone. That's what happens with these. Inside of there is a ball socket like this, but there's like a nylon insert that takes up the gap. If the nylon wears out, then this has room to move and pop and all that kind of stuff. If you can rock your steering wheel back and forth and not move the tires, right? If you have like some play in your steering wheel, that is usually a tie rod end wear, and that's going to cause alignment issues as well. So let's look at those real quick. This is what the tie rod is. This is what I'm talking about.
Your tie rod is usually a long metal rod with a ball joint on one end and threads on the other end. The ball joint end is connected to the steering rack and pinion, and the threaded end is connected to the outer tie rod end. The outer tie rod end also has a ball joint that is connected to the steering knuckle. The tie rods transmit force from the steering rack and pinion to the steering knuckle, which causes the wheels to change direction. As a result of heavy steering impacts or normal wear,
So
the
the green
nylon
is
insert that
the
surrounds the
insert.
ball in the socket wears out,
Now it's worn
causing
out.
looseness in the joint. This can cause clunking noises and alignment problems, which can cause the tire to wear more rapidly.
Yeah, so imagine, so everything that happens on the road, you should be able to feel it in the steering wheel. But if that's worn out, your tire might be doing this as you're driving down the road, but you don't feel it. And when you try to do something, you have to do more effort in order to get it to move because of that gapping that's in there. So that is something you want to get, that's something they check. And tie rods directly affect your toe in your alignment. Okay? Let's go in and look at that rack and pinion a little bit closer.
Driver input from the steering wheel is sent to the steering rack and pinion via the steering shaft. The rotation is converted to horizontal movement by the steering rack and pinion. Most vehicles use hydraulic fluid pressurized by a power steering pump to provide assistance to the driver in turning the wheels. A small valve in the steering rack directs the pressurized fluid according to which direction the driver is trying to turn the wheel. Tie rods and tie rod ends connect the steering rack and pinion to the wheels on the vehicle. As the steering rack and pinion moves left and right, the angle of the wheels change. Some steering components can be adjusted to ensure that all four wheels are aligned correctly. Regular alignment checks help to prevent premature
That's what the
tire
alignment
wear.
rack looks like. It's a cool image. Should go back to that. So they mount it on these turn plates, and then they got these beams that are reading sensors that they mount to the wheels. This is the screen I was telling you about that shows you a bunch of red and green to tell you what's in specification or not. And so that's the printout that you would get, is that screen up there. Okay? So, kind of just a broad overview of what the steering system looks like. Any last questions before we go? Okay. Next week's lab. Right?